In this episode, I have the opportunity to speak with Cyndi O'Meara. She is a nutritionist, best-selling author, international speaker, and founder of Changing Habits. She also created the docu-series What's with Wheat. And so in our conversation, I have an opportunity to dig into kind of the food system, some of the things that are challenged with it, that food is medicine or really foundational to wellness, and the type of food you put into your body and the result of that. We discuss that impact on your microbiome and how critical that is to maintaining proper, I'll call it homeostasis within ourselves, within our body, to keep us healthy. We talk a little bit about our background, spending some time in the United States, going to the University of Colorado in Boulder. She's located in Australia today and lives there and resides there. Some of the things that we discuss also is, our genes in relation to our genetics, and that, yes, there are some predisposed dispositions in our genes that we may be privy to, things like cancer, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's our future. And she touches on that. We talk about the GAPS diet and gardening at home and the importance of just getting in touch with nature and your food system or supply. So sit back, listen, enjoy, and please would welcome some feedback and would certainly welcome 5-star ratings. So thank you. If you find this of value, please share. Remember, be rested, be well. All right, before we jump into the episode, just wanted to share some information about Anchor. It's a great free platform for starting out a podcast. It's what I've been using, and it was a great turnkey solution for me to be able to focus on the primary mission of my podcast and not worry as much about how to get the word out, where to post, things of that nature. Anchor takes care of that for you. They distribute, they set up a platform that is easy to use with lots of tutorials. They give recommendations and coaching on how to even interview on your podcast to get you started. So I would encourage you to look into it, download the free Anchor app, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Now, on to the episode. Well, welcome to another episode of the Rest and Recovery Podcast. I am honored to have Ms. Cyndi O'Meara, a nutritionist, best-selling author, speaker, and founder of Changing Habits, as well as the creator of the docu-series What's with Wheat. Cyndi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Before we dig into kind of the nutritional side of things, and just wanted to get a little bit of your background, just kind of how you got into, I'll call it the wellness space, and just a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'll try and make it as brief as I can, because it really goes back to the way I was brought up. So my dad was a pharmacist, but he moved away from pharmacy because he could see the problems with pharmacy in the 50s. And he traveled to the US, to Iowa, and became a chiropractor. So went from a very mechanistic way of healthcare to a very vitalistic way of healthcare. Met my mum over there. They moved to Australia. My mum was a great cook. And my dad believed that, our body was healthy. It has an innate intelligence. Given the right resources, it should not need any medications except in a life-threatening situation. So he brought all of us up without drugs, no antibiotics, no Panadols, no Bonjelo, none of those things did he give us. And so I'm nearly 60 this year and I've never had one medication, because he believed that give the body that opportunity, it can help with pain and fevers and things like that. So that was my upbringing. So we were also a very adventurous family. We went skiing every year, and I wanted to go to university, but I wanted to ski. And in Australia, you can't do that. So because my mum was an American, I thought, well, I'll go to America. So I went to Boulder and went to CU. And while I was there to ski, that shaped my whole life and what I wanted to do. So I did pre-med and I did a course in anthropology. And that set the stage for me to understand the food that we lived on and survived on throughout evolution. So I thought, great, I'll be a dietitian. Came back to Australia, finished my Bachelor of Science majoring in nutrition, about to go do my dietetics, and thought, I don't even agree with any of this. It's low fat, breakfast cereals, margarine, they white sugars, the food in the hospital system was disgusting. And I thought, this makes no sense to me. And as a young 22-year-old, I thought, well, I can't go against the grain per se. So I went back to university and decided to do human anatomy, learn more about the human body. So I cut up cadavers for 2 years, did pathology, histology, embryology, everyology you think of. And at the end of 6 years of university, I went, I know what the body needs. It needs what it needed throughout evolution, real foods. So I called myself a nutritionist, started to do my practice, and saw incredible results. Had this one man come to me, and it really lynched what I was doing into place. And he was an old farmer in his 70s, and he came and I told him what he needed to do. He had numb legs and he wasn't feeling good and he had no energy. And he sat like this, he just folded his arms and he looked like this for about an hour while I talked to him. And as he left, and I was very respectful of older people because I knew they knew a lot. So I thought, he's not going to do it. Anyway, he rings me during the week and he says, Miss Lovett, because that was my maiden name. He says, I want to talk to you. I need an appointment. So he comes in and he says, I want to tell you a story. He said, I'm a pear farmer. He said, 5 years ago, my pears were terrible. He said, I decided to go back to my old ways of pear farming, get rid of the chemicals, go organic, do everything the way I used to do it. And he said, what a fool I was. I should have done myself as well. He says, I'm going to follow what you do. And he did. He went back to real foods, got rid of breakfast cereals, margarine, low fat, all of that, went back. And he and his wife got a new lease on life, went travelling around Australia. And that was what I think I went, I'm on the right track. I'm doing the right thing. Because here we have agriculture as well as nutrition needing that new, not that new, but that old way.
Right.
And that's basically my story. And then I wrote a book. I wrote for a newspaper for 2 years, very controversial column. I either had people who hated me or absolutely loved what I was saying. And from those 100 articles, I wrote a book in 1998 called Changing Habits, Changing Lives. And that's now morphed into, it was a bestseller, but it's now morphed into another book called Lab to Table. And it's about being a lab rat. And that's what we are at the moment. We're lab rats. People don't know what they're eating. They've lost their intuitiveness about what they should be eating. And it's not a diet book, it's an information book. It's a book about what the food industry is doing. And a lot of people, and that's my forte, is understanding what every food ingredient is, how it's made, what's the patent on it, what it's doing to our health. And that's basically what the book is about is, what's breakfast cereals, what have they done to dairy, what have they done to wheat, what have they done to natural vanilla flavouring. That's the best of all. That just blows my mind how they make that one. But, yeah, this is our new world, our world of naivety about what the food industry is doing to food. They make food look like food, smell like food, taste like food, but not be food. So, yeah, and now we have a nutrition academy. You'll see that's my nutrition academy. We teach people about nutrition. We do an incredible edible garden so people can learn how to make their own foods in their own backyard at minimal cost. And take control and responsibility of their health.
That's awesome. That's a great story, and just it is interesting. And I was thinking about this earlier in the week on how far removed we've gotten from the food source with the big foods, where I guess there's some semblance of positive to the manufacturing element, right? I'm all for the free market, but at the same time, if we get too far removed from it, or we're creating foodstuffs where you need like a translation guide or a class just to figure out what the words are and the ingredients, something's gonna miss.
Most definitely. And it's not really the food industry per se, it's the chemical industry. So they have become very, very intelligent and very smart about, like I said, making food look like food, taste like food, smell like food, but not be food. And so then when somebody says, I'm going to make this new food. I'm going to go out and I'm going to make this food. I've got this idea for a food. And then they go to a show and they meet all the flavors and colors and thickness. And then their speak is very much things like this. Oh, we found a synthetic way to natural. So this is one of the food companies, or chemical companies. We found a synthetic way to make natural stevia or natural citric acid or natural vanilla flavoring. We found a synthetic way. That's what they're saying. And so the naivety of the people that are putting the product together is what the problem is, because they believe what the chemical companies are saying. Oh, it's a natural, but if you don't look at the patent, you have no idea how that is made. Like stevia can be made in several ways. And there are many patents on making the glycoside, not the stevia. It's actually not stevia, because stevia itself is a herb. It's a green leaf.
Right.
It's 38% protein, and then it has all these other wonderful compounds in it. But what you're buying when you say, oh, I want a sweetener that's not sugar, what you're buying is a genetically modified microorganisms byproduct. That's what you're buying.
So it's not even real food.
No. What they do is that they get a gene of the vanilla pod that gives the olfactory smell of vanilla. They insert it into the microbe, and then they put the microbe on a substrate, so a food, and then that microbe makes a substance that they then purify, and that's natural vanilla flavoring. So my question is this, is first of all, where's the studies on what that is doing to our human body, number one? Number two, what if that microbe escapes from that fermentation lab? Do I just have vanilla-smelling poo? Is that what will happen if it gets into my guts? Or will it create a disaster in our microbiome? So they are playing, genetically modifying microbes, fungi, bacteria, and we know viruses, we know they do that. They are manipulating them in order to produce something that they want. And this is where the food industry is going. More and more fermentation labs are being created. More biotechnology labs are being created. And this is how they are making our food additives from, like I said, xanthan gum, citric acid, stevia, legohemoglobin, which brings out the flavour and the blood in fake meat. People just don't realise that this isn't food. This is...
And we wonder... So what is that doing to the body? Like, if it's not real food, I guess that's kind of your question, is we're probably not able to process it. And you wonder why there are these systemic health issues, even at youth now. At least in the USA, you're seeing things that would historically be in the elderly, because your body's starting to change and break down to some extent. But you're seeing things like diabetes in youth at 9 years old. And I wonder if some of it's the food supply.
Well, in Australia, our chronic disease rate in our children is between 38 and 40%. In the US, it's 56% in your children. So we're just behind you. We're not far behind. If we take a schoolroom of 25 children, you will have 56% in your country will have a chronic disease. 2 will have asthma, 2 will have ADD, 2 will have allergies, and that will be engulfed in that group. You may have 1 with autism. The chances of them having autism may be 1 in a school children of 25. I think the chances are like 75% of them having autism. So, I look at it and I just go, what are we doing? What are we doing to the health of the human body? In Australia, if you reach the age of 60, you have an 80% chance of having chronic disease. And now we have, infectious diseases, seeming to be rampant. And we're finding that the comorbidities of these infectious diseases, so the comorbidities like diabetes, heart disease, lung issues, are making them more susceptible to it. So wouldn't it make more sense to go, let's look at the health of the human body. What are we doing to it? What have we done to it? And what do we have to do in order to make sure that it can, take on communicable diseases and not have chronic diseases? We have, I think it's 380,000 trillion viruses in our body right now. We have an incredible amount of bacteria, parasites. We are 10% genetically human. 90% we're bugs. And we have lived in this incredible world of bugs, and we have survived as human beings without a vaccine, without the chronic diseases, without all of these issues. We have survived. Right. And now we're in a position where we're not surviving. People are dying with have these chronic diseases. And what I don't know what's happening in the US, but in Australia, our government is saying 1.5 meters from, humans, don't go outside, stay home, wash your hands, use disinfectants. There's nothing being said about food. There's nothing being said, hey, if you've got a healthy body, which is obvious, then you're not going to have the symptoms of coronavirus. You may get it, but you won't get the symptoms because your body is healthy. It will know what to do with that virus, pack it away in its cells, let it figure itself out, get an antiviral whatever to it, and we'll be fine.
Yeah, you strengthen the host up. You're not concerned about the external viruses. You might be a little off, but it's not going to affect you anywhere near that. We're hearing some reports for people. But yeah, it seems that the health, the preconditions of a number of folks are major contributing factors like diabetes that are having a major effect on this or any virus for that matter, really. So you mentioned the microbiome, and we're talking about bacteria. Like that's another area where like our stomach, our gut is made up of different bacterial elements and critical to our health. So with that being said, so you kind of touch on food as medicine. I've heard that term before. Yeah. We're kind of touching on that. Can you expand a little further?
Well, I think for us to be healthy, we need to do what our evolutionary body needs to do. It needs. So we think about the hunter-gatherer, and we don't live in a hunter-gatherer life anymore. We live in a city. We live, maybe in an urban environment. But we still have to appease the body's need for what it evolved in order to get to this stage in life. So if we go back 1.2 million years, we were Homo habilis. We started to use fire. So that was the beginning of light at night. So it was a red light. And then Homo erectus came in, and then Homo sapien, and then they say about 400,000 to 600,000 years Homo sapien sapien, which is us. This is who we are. But we evolved with food, we evolved with the earth, we evolved with fire, we evolved with all of these things that were really important for our health. So food is one of the medicines that the body needs. And it's not a medicine, it's a requirement, something that the body needs in order to function. So food is one, but what were the foods? The foods were, there were meats, and there were vegetables, and there were fruits, and then we did grains and legumes. So there are cultures around the world that have adapted to very, very different types of diet. So to say that one diet is good for one person or for the whole world is wrong, because we can look at people who live in the deserts, and they live on a very much a animal produce and animal food diet. They have very few plants. If we look at, and they're the Himbas in Namibia, if we look at the Kagirs in Pamir, 14,000 feet above sea level, they have yaks. They drink milk from the yak, and occasionally they eat the yak. And then when the spring comes, they start to get food, carbohydrates. But then you look at the people on the equator, such as the Dani and Lani of Papua New Guinea, who live in the highlands. They eat a carbohydrate diet. 90% of their diet is carbohydrate, with 10% maybe rodents or insects or some sort of meat source. Or the Catawbas that live on the equator, on an island. They live on carbohydrates, but with fish and saturated fat. So when we say food is medicine, food is that is seasonal, local, and has quality, allows your body to live the best life it can live. But what we see now is we go to a grocery store, we have packaged food. Those packaged foods can come from anywhere around the world that may not even be food. But it tastes like food, so we think, oh, it's okay for us. But all it's doing is filling a calorie need. It's not filling the body's actual need. So as well as food, you think about your environment. You know, if you live in the cold, you become cold adapted. If you live in the heat, you become heat adapted. They didn't wear shoes, and now we're beginning to understand grounding. And grounding is where we have this flow of electrons from the planet Earth to us. Those electrons fuel our electron transport chain, which is in our mitochondria, which gives us energy in order to do all the processes of the body, as well as the energy to do what you want to do. Be excited about life, get energy, stay out and do things, jump, play. Yeah. Those are the important things. Sunshine is also important. So we have the need to be up early. A lot of people don't get up. They don't see that 2 hours in the beginning. That stops melatonin, produces serotonin. And that's really important for your wake cycle. Yeah, sun in the middle of the day. These are all things that we did as hunter-gatherers that we're not doing as humans living on this planet. And we have to fake to our human body these medicinal, and we could call them medicinal, but these things that we did. Herbs were medicinal. They were a big part of everybody's life because they sprouted everywhere. They're weeds. That's what herbs are. They're actually, as somebody called them recently, they're volunteers. They volunteer to put down roots to save the soil, to give microbes to the soil, to give us life,
Yeah.
This is the way we should be looking at our life and our food.
Yeah, you touched on something. I had a previous guest last week who's an herbalist, and we were talking about the farming, and you touched on two things: the farming and the local and the environment, and that those can affect your body because you become adjusted to the local environment, the air, like you mentioned, the cold exposure or wherever you live, but the food as well, the local food, and how your body processes that food. Can you explain that a little further?
Yeah. So like we talked about different people that live in different places of the world and how they've adapted to the food that's available to them. And some of them may have had a different type of diet, and then they've moved south or north or up or down, altitude, and they've had to adapt to what's in that environment. And every single organ in your body has a circadian rhythm, from the pancreas, the digestive system, the brain. Everything has its own circadian rhythm. So the food that you're consuming in your local area, your body is adapted to that food. And this was never considered until recently, when we realized the circadian rhythms of the body and the body's ability to know where it is on the planet and what time it is, and all of the things that work. And the other thing that I just find so fascinating that we're beginning to realize is that all the bacteria and the viruses and everything that's in your body and in a flurry in the air and in the soil are all communicating with each other all the time. So if you grow your own food and use your hands to grow your own food, there's a communication system that goes between you, the soil, and the plant. So what ends up happening is that there's this communication system that says, this is what this body needs now. This is the food that you've planted. We will give you that nutrition in order to do that. And let me give you a really good example of this. So a mother breastfeeds a baby. That baby is in contact with that mother's skin, but the saliva of the baby is communicating with that mother, the breast milk, the skin, the bacteria, in order to give the right nutrition to that baby and what that baby needs. There's a communication system, and that is done by the saliva, the microbes, the skin contact. Everything is communicating. So it's not hard to realize that when you go down to the ground and are nurturing a plant and growing your own food, that there's a communication between you and the soil and that plant that enables you to get what your body needs. So I grow my own foods, not everything, but I grow a lot of my own foods. And, I have to admit there's a real awe in you putting a seed in the ground, or you create a seedling and you put that in the ground and you nurture it and you spend time with it. And I talk to them. I thank them every time I pick them.
Yeah.
Like I was picking rosemary this morning for my husband. He was doing a slow cook. And he said, will you cook me some rosemary? And I just go, thanks. And I take it off. I think we have to have a reverence about our food. And we've lost that reverence, and we've lost that ability to understand what food and the communication that we have with that food.
Yeah.
So that's why I believe it's time for us, and I think this is a really good time on planet Earth to get that reverence about growing your own food, no matter where you are. So you can have, you can put it in a cupboard. When I mean like that, like in an old drawer, put it on your veranda, fill it with dirt, and plant your vegetables in it. You can plant so many herbs and greens in that. You can plant, if it's a deep cupboard, you can plant carrots in it, so
Yeah.
I hope I haven't gone on about it, but that's my belief about it.
Yeah, no, I think you're hitting on a chord that, at least in my house, it resonates. And I'm seeing it from my seat, where I think this is a moment of reset, or reassessing, at least personally, and a number of other folks in my community group, on what's important, and prioritizing things, and, a semblance of self-sufficiency, even personal sovereignty. And as you said, a little bit of perspective and gratefulness of where your food comes from, and understanding how, not just whether it's, the meats you get or the vegetables, just understanding and appreciating the process. Maybe even gardening help slow us down a little bit in this fast-paced, crazy world that we're in.
But it doesn't take a lot. Like the other day, I bought 12 seedlings that were lettuces, and because all my other pots, and I have it in pots, because all my other pots were kind of full, I thought, I just need to create another pot. So in the morning, I got up and I put some mulch down, filled the pot with some organic soil that I had purchased. I could go and get it from my farm, because I do have a farm. I saw this. I felt terrible about what was happening with food for a long time, and it was about 5 years ago now, I purchased a farm. And I'll tell you about that in just a minute. But I do also live in a home in an urban place. And so it took me 5 minutes to put the mulch down, throw the dirt in, plant the seedlings, and then put mulch over my seedlings and give it a water, like 5-10 minutes. Now, all I do is every day I look at them, I water them, I say thank you as I pass by them, and very, very quickly that will just keep growing and growing and growing. So it's not a time-consuming thing once you're organised. And it's like anything. If you are organised in your fridge and in your pantry, you can make a food in 5 minutes. So this morning I got up, I went for my morning exercise, came home and prepared my breakfast and lunch. But I have done I've done prep in my fridge in order to do that. So I had made a mixed salad. So I grow all my herbs and all my salads. So I always prepare the week before. I will go and pick lettuces and herbs, and I'll make a really good mix out of it. And it's in a container about I know probably people are listening to this, but I was doing the measurement. So it's in a container in the fridge. So I pull it out, throw it in my bowl. I've already made my pesto, my chili jam, because my chilies are going nuts at the moment. So I've already made my pesto and my chili jam and my mayonnaise. So, and I've roasted up some vegetables from the night before. So I'll throw it all in together. And then because I had some leftover long stewed meat, I put that in. That's minutes that I've made my lunch. And then my breakfast is I make a thing called Cater. So Cater is coconut, almond, date, and apple. And I actually do Kadag because I put ginger in it as well. So it's a moist muesli that I make up, chopping up the nuts, grating the apple. But, everything is almost pre-done except for the grating of the apple. And you just mix that all together, put some homemade yogurt on top, and people are like going, oh, my gosh, she makes her own yogurt. Hey, I got ways that are so easy. But we've lost this beautiful art. We've lost this art of simplifying our life with our food. having single ingredients in our pantry and our fridge, doing a bit of prep. It's not a lot, but doing a little bit of prep, and making sure that we are consuming foods that are high in nutrition. So you don't need to take supplements. I'm not a supplement girl. I'm a food girl. And if I spend the time when I'm like at this age and younger for my health, then I'm not going to have to spend a lot of time later for illness. And when you consider what is happening to people, the last 15 years of their life are spent in illness. I don't want the last 15 years of my life in illness. I want to be, I want to be like a light, few flickers at the end, boom, I'm gone. That's what I want, and at 60, nearly 60, I can run a long way. I can swim a long way. I can do push-ups. I live a really, really vibrant life. But I haven't had the genes for this. I have hemophilia, cancer, Budd-Chiari, autoimmune diseases all throughout the history of my family. So I learned that if I don't do something about my genes and switch the good, healthy ones on, then I'm going to live, I'm not going to survive.
Yeah.
So this is what people have to realize is that yes, you're given a genetic lottery, but you don't have to live with that genetic lottery because remember, you are only 10% human genes. The rest you can nurture.
Yeah, and that's a really encouraging point because I think too often a lot of people, that's my family history, and they just accept it as fact, and that's just who I am. But you can have control or significant influence in not permitting those types of things, whether it's fill in the blank of long-term sickness or family heredity.
Yeah, you don't have to. Like when we were told that, if you've got the BRCA genes, then you're going to get breast cancer. And before the microbiome revolution started, people were having their breasts removed as a result of their genetic, makeup. You got BRCA. Yeah, this is what was happening. And now that we've understood the microbiome, we go, hang on. Maybe it's not the gene. Maybe it's the epigenetics, the exposome, the exosomes, the nutrigenomics, the metabologenomics. So there's all of these things that are actually turning on and off genes. Did you know that if you move and do exercise, you turn on 75% of healing genes just by movement? Nutrigenomics shows that foods turn on and off genes. Herbs have that ability. And we're just beginning to realize this. The sun will make vitamin D for you. So therefore it's really not a vitamin because a vitamin is a, in its terminology, it's something that we can't make. But we actually make our vitamin D. Do you know that your microbiome makes your vitamin B? All your vitamin Bs your microbiome makes. Your microbiome makes your vitamin K.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, this is your microbiome. Your microbiome makes tyrosine, tryptophan, and phenylalanine. These are 3 amino acids. 2 are essential amino acids that they say we should be eating, but our microbiome makes it for us. And in the gut, 90% of our neurotransmitters are being made, and they need tyrosine, tryptophan, and phenylalanine. So 90% of the neurotransmitters being made in the gut are being prepped by our microbiome. You nurture that microbiome, you will have the neurotransmitters that you need in order to do all the things that your nervous system needs. But the problem is this, is that we have thought about, and we still are thinking about, bugs as something dangerous. But they are something that we live with. And this is what... and I don't know when this is going to go to air, whether this is going to go to air in, whatever time. But, in the middle of this COVID-19 stuff, people are freaking out about a virus that has been around for a long time. Corona has been around for a long time, and this is a version of the coronavirus. Our body knows what to do with it. And yes, people who are not well are susceptible to it. But if you have a strong immune system, let me give you an example of a really strong, like what I think is a strong immune system. So I've not, like I said, I've had no medications. I've lived a healthy life. I've done the best that I can possibly do. So I've given blood for many, many years. And Australia decided, I don't know how long ago, it must be 7 or 8 years ago now, that they were going to screen for malaria. And I was given a letter. So they screened me when I went to give blood. I gave it 4 times a year. They screened me for malaria, and I had what they said, and I can show you the letter. It says I had an wasn't an antiviral, but I had
Antibody?
Like an antibody. Yeah, they called it an antibody. So I always think of an antibody as a bacteria. So they said in the letter they had an antibody for malaria. And I went, but I've never had malaria. So I went to a doctor and I just said, look, this is the letter I got, but I've never had malaria. Never had the symptoms. I've seen people with malaria, but I've never had it. So obviously I got the parasite, because that's what it is, and my body was able to figure it out. I got the antibody, the antiparasitic for it, and it shows up in my blood. So I can't give blood anymore because I've had malaria, but I've never had it. And another one is that German measles. When I got pregnant for the first time, they do a blood test, and it said obviously immunised against German measles. So I rang my mum and I said, Mum, I didn't know I'd had a vaccine for German measles. She said, no, you haven't. And I said, did I have German measles? Now, she was a nurse, so she knew what German measles was about. She said, no, you never had German measles. But obviously I did. I got in contact with it, but didn't show the symptom to it. So when you have a healthy immune system, you may come in contact with it, get the antibody to it, and then you don't need to express the disease.
Your body handles it the way it should and keeps, I guess, the biomarker as a reminder, okay, we've fended this off before, and move on.
Yeah, and that's your adaptive immune system. So you have an innate and an adaptive. And, when I went through university, that's what I learned. We have an innate, which we're born with, and then we have an adaptive, which we will see for the rest of our life. Our body will keep adapting to it. But now what they're saying is, oh, hang on, we don't just have an innate and an adaptive immune system, we have a microbiome, which has viruses and parasites and fungi and molds and bacteria, and they also are part of the innate and the adaptive immune system. And when you consider that 70% of your immune system is sitting in your gut, so your gut has a lot to do with your immune system.
Yeah.
So we've got to make sure our gut is healthy. We've got to make sure our microbiome is healthy. We've got to make sure we're healthy and that we're feeding the body the right things. So the microbiome loves plants. It feeds on resistant starches and all the plant matter. Your body feeds on animal products. So your body needs those foods that are in animal products in order for it to get its nourishment. So if you look at somebody who has a screwed up microbiome, one of the best things that you can do to it is stop giving it plants and do a completely meat-based broths, slow-cooked meats, pâtés,
really?
Butters. Yeah, so it's called the GAPS diet. I don't know if you've ever heard of the GAPS diet.
I have heard, yes, yeah. I'm familiar with the term, but I didn't know that much. Okay.
So Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride goes, we're going to what's taken over your microbiome is pathological bacteria, fungi, parasites, things like that. We need to starve them. So we're going to stop all sugars, carbohydrates, anything that's going to feed them, we're going to not feed them. So what she does is that she gives them nourishing broths. So it's very much based on Western Price. You're in Virginia, you've got, the head of Western Price Foundation there in Virginia, and it's all based on historical diets.
Okay.
And so we kill off the pathological bacteria, then we start to feed the good bacteria and start to nurture them and bring them back. And the way we bring them back is we bring them back with fermented foods, like sauerkrauts and kimchis and kefas and yogurts and, all of the traditional fermented foods that are out there. And so we start to feed the good ones. And so we crowd out the bad ones and we feed the good ones again. But first, we've got to stop feeding those pathological bacteria. And they want sugars and wheats and flours and you will notice that a child with autism, a child that is not behaving well, a child with allergies will want those white foods, because that's the bacteria saying, feed me, give me sugar, give me this, I need to survive. And then that affects the brain, and then we have a gut-brain axis, and it's a vicious cycle, and you've got to break that vicious cycle. And the way you do it is you stop feeding it plants and you start feeding the human body with those meats and those pates and the butters, because butter has butyrate in it, which feeds the enterocytes of the gut wall, which then nurtures them. And I've seen miracles. I've seen absolute miracles with that protocol, and I'm a GAPS practitioner. And Natasha Campbell McBride says this: you have to get back into the kitchen to feed and nourish your family to heal this nation. And that's not more truer than it is right now. And I just like to add a little bit and get back into the garden. Start growing your food, go to your garden, bring it into the kitchen to feed and nourish your family to heal this nation.
That, I mean, that's just amazing stuff, because I've heard of the GAPS, as I mentioned, and just I'd not heard of the methodology of going straight to the bone broths and the meats, which I'd be totally fine with, especially with the butter. But the bread part I'd want, even though I'm gluten-free. But yeah, it's just definitely fascinating that, if you know what you're looking for and understanding your body's response to things, how we can nourish it and help it along. And as you said, just build that strong foundation of wellness, and kind of focus on a lifespan versus a health span. You mentioned that last 15 years, just the drop off, and you hear about the healthcare costs on the tail end of your life, and that's where 90% of the costs go. Well, how do you shift that? Well, live the previous 60 or 70 or 80 years, kind of the way you're suggesting, thinking in the long game, it seems.
Yeah, definitely. And it is the long game. And I want to be the best version that I could possibly be. And I'm not going to do it eating McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken. And yet they're allowed to stay open in this whole thing.
Exactly.
I think they should be banned. If I was Prime Minister of Australia, I would have banned all ultra-processed foods. Most people would have starved, so I probably would have starved quite a few people. But you know what? By people fasting, their body will use their fat in order to survive. So we might have not had an obesity rate. Yeah. I'm ruthless, aren't I? I'm very ruthless.
That is too funny. Well, we're coming up on time. I'm grateful again for the amount of time you spent and great explanation. I mean, tons of great information. What I'd like to close out with is a couple of personal questions. So what are you reading right now?
Oh, well, I'm actually reading Plague of Corruption by Judy Mikovits.
Okay.
So Judy wrote a book 4 or 5 years ago called Plague. Do you know Judy Mikovits?
No, I'm not familiar.
All right. So Dr. Judy Mikovits worked with chronic fatigue, and her first book was Plague. And April this year, so just this year, she's brought out Plague of Corruption. And it's riveting. Scary, and I would suggest to make her a bestseller and buy her book. I do believe the actual book has sold out, but you can still get it on Kindle. Okay. And if you download the Kindle version and you just do the sample, you will get an idea of it, and you will not want to buy it. So, Judy Mikovits, and she's written it with another author, but I don't remember his name, Henry somebody, but it's Plague of Corruption.
I'll look it up. And
also read her Plague book. She does summarize her Plague book in there, but that's also good. And the other book that I'm reading at the moment is Babylon Religion. And a friend gave it to me, and it's about plagues, and it's about humans, and it's about the dark side of humans. And it's a bit of a dark book. And it's a little bit of an eye-opener for me, but it's about the Inquisition and Catholicism and paganism. And for me, I'm seeing a dark side in this whole COVID-19. And I want to understand it, because I think I've lived in a really naive world. I've lived in a world in Australia where I didn't know what humans were like. and the brutality of humans and what they could do. And I'm actually seeing that now, and I don't know if what's happening in America, but in Australia, there's a huge pedophile ring that is being uncovered at the moment. And they're finding children that have been stolen and women. So I want to be awake. I want to be conscious. And it's like, if I can just explain why I'm listening to this at the moment or reading it at the moment. When I was in 1995, around that era, I had 3 babies. I was a mum, lived on the Sunshine Coast. My husband worked. I worked at home, had a beautiful life. I didn't know that in Rwanda there was a genocide happening. And it wasn't until after the year 2000 that I read the book Left to Tell by a lady that lost her whole family to this genocide and lived in a cupboard for 7 weeks. And I felt guilty as somebody that didn't know this was happening. So we're in a crisis right now. I want to know exactly what humans are like and what people are like. And I have to take that veil over take that veil away. And that's why I'm reading this book. It's a 1961 book. It's cool. If you look up Google and you go Babylon Religion, you'll find that book that was done in 1961. But anyway, that's the dark book that I'm reading. Otherwise, I'm reading Plague of Corruption.
Okay, so what are you listening to right now, music or podcasts?
London Real.
London Real, yes.
London Real. Yep. And I just listened to, I'm not finished yet, but I just listened to Dr. Batan. Loving him. I love Robert Kennedy. I think Robert Kennedy Jr., the environmental lawyer, I listened to him speak 4 or 5 years ago in the US.
Okay.
And I listened to all of his lectures online. I read all of his information. Del Bigtree Highwire. Do you know Del Bigtree Highwire?
I'm familiar. I am.
Yeah, I don't watch news. I don't watch mainstream. I think there's another agenda there. So I look at people that I can trust. I met Del Bigtree 5 years ago. I met Robert Kennedy 5 years ago. So they're probably, and London Real I've just started listening to because I was looking for information about Batan. So I really like Batan. So I don't know his first name, Dr. So starts with R. Rajanasha.
Yeah, I don't recall. I'm familiar with London Real and the pretty recent episodes from them.
And the other person that I'm listening to who's got some really good interviews is Pete Evans, Evolve. So Pete's a local Australian chef, and so I'm listening to his podcasts at the moment. Okay. So my life is consumed with those 4 people. And I might even start listening to yours.
All right, great.
Now that I know more about it. Yeah.
So speaking of which, this is the Rest and Recovery podcast. And so we're looking at, what is your favorite rest and recovery method?
Swimming.
Swimming?
In the ocean.
Yeah.
So I have a sleep. Yes, I rest and recover at sleep. But at the moment, I'm up very early before the sun rises. I watch the sunrise. I do Wim Hof breathing. I then get into the water. I swim about 1 kilometre in the ocean, so that, breathing in the ions of the ocean, having salt immersed. That would be one of my rest and recovery, and my other one is going to my farm and just playing in my garden and just walking through it. And, yeah, they're probably my 2 rest and recoveries.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, Cyndi. I'm so grateful, and you have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Lots of great practical tips covered here today. And if you know someone who could get some value out of this episode, please share. Be super grateful. We're all about being well and improving our life. And so if someone can get value out of this, please remember to subscribe, review, and share. Again, grateful for you. Remember, be rested, be well.